and share the screen. And we are almost done with the semester. Yay! I hope I made it so far challenging for you, especially with this last lab. What is today's? Today's 28. Let's keep an eye on the schedule, because sometimes I get lost track. Remember, you have Chapter 9 quiz due by 9 p.m. today, so tomorrow morning I can start taking the attendance. We are covering Chapter 10. When you do Chapter 10 on Monday, there will be not much of an in-lab, because all this is kind of reviewing arrays and predefined function calls for you. That is all with Chapter 10. So it's kind of review and just new function calls that you can call. And we'll also discuss your Lab 5. People say Lab 4 was challenging. Lab 5 should be a piece of cake. So let's go over Chapter 10. Pay very close attention to Chapter 10, because you'll be using things that you learned in Chapter 10 to do your Lab 5. And also keep on the prize your Lab 6 rough draft turned in. Normally when we are in classroom, it would be a hard copy to me. But since we are not in the classroom, I want you to email me, and you have to have an acceptance by, I'm not going to say midnight that day, but by end of class period that day to turn in a rough draft. And we'll go over what the rough draft looks like. It doesn't have to be perfect or pristine. It's just an idea of what I want the write-up to eventually look like. What are you going to agree to for your Lab 6? Because remember, you're creating your Lab 6. And some of the easy points for it is turning your write-up, doing the demo. Yes, you'll be doing the demo virtually. So think about what you would want to accomplish. So let's get started with Chapter 10. And remember, if you have questions, just speak up. So can you guys see my screen before I get started?
Yep.
Okay, so let's start. This will be quick. Chapter 10 is character, C-strings, and more about string classes. So it's a review. That's why it says if you get past chapters 4, 5, and 6, the second half of this class is a lot of review, and it's easier. Character testing. You need to have a new preprocessor directive called CC type. For those of you that's going to go to object-oriented programming, you'll see a lot of setters and getters. Remember, what setters will be setting something, getter will be getting something. And when you see something is, and usually other languages too, it usually returns back a Boolean, true or false. Is something what it is? Yes. Is this condition true or false? Then it always is, usually is something. So for helping with taking quiz and so forth, if you see a function that starts with an is, always think that it's going to return back something that's true or false. Because is something what it is. So is alpha. It returns true if the letter, aka character that I'm passing in, is an alpha character. If it's not, it returns false. Alpha num, same thing. If it's a letter or digit, it returns true, otherwise it's false. Is digit, if it's true, it will return true. Is lower, the argument AAG is argument. If the argument is lowercase, it will return true, otherwise false. Is print, that means if it's a space, I think it's a tab. I kind of sometimes have to go back to review this because I always kind of forget. If it's printable, then it will be turned back as true. If it is a punctuation, it's true. Is upper, is space. You understand the concept. The function gives you what it will do. Is this? Any questions on that? It's pretty straightforward.
one thing. This isn't a question about like well, it kind of is, but I was gonna say, why do the C++? How come the name of the functions like? Why don't they uppercase because it's the function like is digit? Why don't they uppercase the D because it's another word?
Make it camel notation. Like normally, that's the standard practice. Is you would use camel notation. Like the lowercase would be the some of the functions would be lowercase is, and then the other one, the next character would be a D, would be capitalized. That whoever created these functions, that's on them. I can't answer that. I don't know. Normal practice is if you do that, you would always do camel notation, especially when you get into programming frameworks. The introspection looks for that. Like with the setters and getters, the SET, the S would be lowercase, and if it's, let's say, first name, it would be lowercase, all SET, capital F, then the rest IRST lowercase, and the capital N, the rest lowercase. That's usually the most standard that you would come across. And when you do introspect with some framework, that's the syntax that they are looking, because I know I got sideswiped one time when I was red. I didn't do the capitalization correctly, and it kept on failing. But with the question why they don't, like for is alpha, don't capitalize the A or in the alpha num, I don't know. That would be the creator, whoever did CC type. They didn't do it. Sorry, I cannot give you a better answer. I can say why they didn't capitalize. But normally it is proper syntax. Not it's how can I say? It's recommended. It's not enforced. The enter characters in is just testing you right here. If you enter a character, it goes through these if statements and prints them out. Remember, is returns back true or false, so you can put them in an expression. When you word of to, you think of something, an action, to do something. So it is also part of CC type, but to upper takes a character, and if the character is lowercase, return the uppercase equivalent. Let me repeat that, uppercase equivalent. Otherwise, return input unchanged. Remember, all these characters have decimal values. American Standard for Information Interchange. So when you give a lowercase h, it's actually receiving the numeric value for lowercase h, and it's passing back, since it knows that is a character code. It's going to give you, I think it's sometimes like plus 26 values. The lower cases are lower than the higher ones. I think I always have to look at the ASCII table. But it's when it's equivalent, it's giving back the numeric value of it. But since I'm assigning it to a char, it understands that to be a character. That's why you see uppercase equivalent. It's not, you're not passing a lowercase h and you're going to get capital H. You're actually getting the ASCII code. But for all purposes, for quizzes and tests, you get the capital ones back. But since right here, you're assigning the character back, it's going to display it as a character. But I just wanted you to understand where it says character uppercase equivalent. But for this one, when it's H, it's two upper, so it just echoes it back, saying, hey, I'm already capital. And when it's E, lowercase e, it gives you capital E back. But when it's not a character that has an uppercase equivalent, it just echoes that back, says, I don't know what to do with it. I'm returning what you gave me. Same concept in reverse for to lower. Remember, is returns back true, false, to some kind of action. C strings C strings, think of them as nothing but a character array. Because the old C, when I was studying programming, we didn't start off with C++. TCC has open enrollment, so you can go to any course you want. They do offer a C course. But traditionally, when I did my undergrad, it was, since I had COBOL, I didn't have to take the Pascal, the beginning language. But the first programming language before C++ I had to take was C. Then C, then C++, and then all the algorithms and so forth that I studied were in C++ because that was the main language at the time, because Java was just picking up notoriety. They were just now picking up because I was back in, like, I think early 2000s, so I'm dating myself. C string is a sequence of characters stored in adjacent memory locations and terminated by a null. So think of that as a character array. A string literal contains sequence of characters enclosed in quotes. Remember, string, double quotes, and you have more of the characters. C is one single characters. So an array of characters can be used to define storage for a string. This is the old C style. This is the way I first learned, because we didn't have string library. We didn't have string. There was a string.h, but most of the time when we read in data from a string, from a user, we use a character array because we called it a character buffer, because we had to read something into it. We didn't have this nice concept of a string that you learned earlier on. So same concept here. You're defining a character array. We normally did elabs, we did ints, but right now we're talking about character array. Leave room for the null at the end. Remember when we talked about strings and so forth, it never included the null terminating bit. So we always would have to consider if the max character that we could read in, the character buffer of 20 right here, we could only read in 19 characters because the 20th character had to be the null terminating bit. We can enter a value using the cin or the indirection operator. Remember, you cin, it ignores the white spaces at the beginning. It stops at another white space or the new line. So input is white space terminated. No check to see if there's enough space. So remember, no bounds checking. For input containing white space and to control amount of input, use the get line. Remember, the cin get line reads the entire string, the entire line in. Here's an example. They have 80 right here, size 80, which means at most we can read in 79 characters because the last one has to hold the last null terminating. So that's why they say enter in the sentence of no more than size -1. They read in the entire line because they're using a get line. If they didn't, it would stop right here, and the rest of this would be in a buffer. Because they're using get line, it reads the entire line all the way up to the new line. Displaying the characters one at a time, they're going to keep on displaying it until the new line comes to place.
What happens if you don't leave room for the null character?
If you don't, it depends. If you do not leave enough room and you append the null, you got out of bounds for an array. So it all depends on the scenario. If you read up, let's say 79, and you append or read up all 80 characters, and then you append the null terminating bit, you got an array overflow. So it all depends on the scenario. Library functions for working with C strings. Just like we have a string, we have another preprocessor directive, C string. Functions take in one or more C strings as arguments. Can use C string name. Remember, C string name is nothing but the array name. Pointer to C string, remember, pointer to a C string and array name are kind of interchangeable. They both store the address of the starting point of the array or a literal string. For string length, it's just like size for string. It returns back the actual value of characters in the array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's no terminating bit right here, but remember it doesn't count that. So that is why string length returns 8. String cat concatenates string 2 to string 1. So here's your char location size. Here's your array empty. So you're going to take in state and append it to location. The location is Missoula and comma, and then you're going to attach Missoula comma, and then you append MT. Make sure the size can handle the concatenation. String copy copies string 2 to string 1. Take this, copy the contents to this. Doesn't append, so whatever's here is probably going to be wiped away. So you're copying this values to here. Remember, no bounds checking. There is other versions of string copy that is strncpy, which would have a third argument that says copy this into this and give a number of bytes that it wants to copy. Remember, these are arrays, no bounds checking. String and string, to me this is like a search. Find the contents of string 2 in string 1, and it will return that location if it finds it. If not, it returns null. Like it's trying to find ABA, so it goes right here. So it finds ABA, the starting point right here, and then they're going to do string cat. So it's going to start here and display this information out. ABA. ABA-SH will be displayed out because of the pointing here. Hey, we found this is the occurrence of it at the beginning, so here it is. If it doesn't find it, it returns back a null saying, I didn't find it. Another preprocessor directive is sysdlib. Do not know why they come up with these preprocessor directive names. I think this is also one that requires if you want to do the exit status of success and failure. ATOI converts a C string to an int. So think about it this way. String, character, alpha character to numeric. Alpha, numeric. So think of it ATOI. Take this character A to, an integer. ATOI. Alpha character to an int. Same thing with this. Alpha character to a long. Alpha character to a float. Because a lot of times when you have these information going back and forth, people reading them in or coming up from an interface, that those interfaces or those web XMLs, when you unmarshal them, they will become strings. However, they created that interface and so forth that I've seen. Hey, it's a string, but it's technically the string is actually a numeric characters, but I have to convert it to a numeric so I can do my calculations on it. I've seen a lot of that when I worked in the pharmacy when I was reading in characters on a flat file, and I had to go, oh, this 123-100 is actually the number of pills in that bottle when you did drug inventory, but it's reading it as a character, so I'm going to have to take these characters and convert them to a numeric value so I can add it to the quantity on hand. So that's where these functions become useful, because you might have a string coming in and you need to convert it to something else. You can't necessarily use the typecasting because it might not cast it correctly. You want to convert it. It's not converting from, let's say, an int to a float, and sometimes casting from a string to an int using casting. It doesn't work the same. You have to convert it. And since think of it this way, it's reverse. Take the integer and put it to a string, alpha. So sometimes that can help you understand the difference. Convert the first string parameter to C string parameter, and the third one be the base converted. This is a little bit more intense because remember we have binary, octal, and hexadecimal. So right here, here's an example. You're taking this string, converting it to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's an integer. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 character to a long. So now it's going to be a long. A to F, this is a double, so now it's going to be a double. Here's the ATOI. Takes this inum, converts it to this string with this base. So 2322, it puts a string 2322 in here because that's the representation of it in octal. Remember, base 8 is octal. We talked about octal. Binary is base 2, octal is base 8, hexadecimal is base 16, decimal is base 10. Remember, I had the chart up at the beginning of the course. You do not have to know how to convert them. Just know that what numbering systems there are in computer science. Binary, decimal, oct, and hexadecimal. If C string numeric conversion functions notes. If C string contains no digits, results are undefined. This is, to me, part of whoever wrote this was poorly done. In other languages such as Java, if they can't convert something, it throws a number format exception. So they have exception. So sometimes you have to might go look at the version of the version of compile you have, C++ that you're compiling into, and see what it does. Because it may return a 0, it may return garbage, it may echo the value back, it may have been changed. That's why you always look at documentation, C++ reference guides. I look at Java's documents all the time because they go in depth what they accept and what they can throw as exceptions. So when in doubt, look at the documentation reference manuals for that particular version of the language you're in, because sometimes it will change from different versions. So functions may return results up to a non-digit. So if it comes with, let's say, Bob 123, this function may return results up to the non-digits. It will be Bob, but if it's 123 Bob, it might return 123, but not do the others. So always read the documentation. If you're uncertain of how it says it will handle it, read it. Function may also return 0. This is why I think it's poor. They should have, whoever came up with the C++ version or CSCD LIB, they should have said, no, we need to do one or the other and have a standard. I2A does not do bounds checking because you're taking a numeric value and putting it into an array. So remember, C and C++ do no bound checking whatsoever. So be careful of when you're converting it from from a numeric to a string, that you still have enough characters to hold that. This is the strings other way around. We talked about character arrays. Now we're talking about the string, the normal string that we all talked about with earlier on with the string preprocessor. Take a string, make it an int. Take a string, convert it to a long. Do not worry about this string unsigned long, which means, remember we talked about why it's unsigned long? It can store longer values because I don't have to count for the negative parts to it. And you won't see this too much. Unsigned long, string to a floating point, string to a double, and string to a long double. Most time you would do string to a double, string to a long, string to an int. Not so much worried about unsigns and so forth. The string to a function, toString, it takes an integer value and change it to a string. This is the reverse to this. This takes a string, converts it to a numeric. This takes the numeric and converts it to the string. Java handles this so much better. So much. Because they have a thing called parser, parse.toInt. Long.toInt, or if it's an integer object, there's a attribute on it that you do .toString, and it does it for other languages, handle this better. But for your understanding, this one takes a string, because you see the S, and you see the 2. Remember, action, S, 2, unsigned. This just reads it right out to you. It does a string. Everything else, it just, think of this as kind of like an overloaded function. Everything's toString. It just, the only difference is the argument that I pass into it. Writing your own C-string handling function is to design C-string handling functions. Can pass array or pointers to character arrays. Remember, arrays by themselves with no names is an address, and pointer is an address. Awesome. So it works best either way. Can perform bounds checking to ensure enough space for results. So when you do these, make sure you're cautious of how much characters, how many space you have, and can anticipate unexpected user input, data validation. So when they're doing right here, the string copy, they're creating their own function to copy. So they're saying, while string index is not equal to the null terminating bit, copy this array, string 1 to string 2, and increment the index. Eventually, this will have the null terminating bit and it'll exit out. Once that's done, they're going to append the null terminating bit to the end of the string 2. So that's what they're doing, is writing their own C-string handlers. Same thing with name slice. Locate the first space in the null terminating bit. So they're taking this username, looking for the space, what's not equal to space, and user count is not equal to null terminating bit, because they don't want to break the bounds of the array. So either they're going to find that space right here, or they're going to find the end of the string. One or the other. And that's why there's an end right here. One of this is going to eventually fail. If the space was found, replace it with the null. So if they find the space, replace it with the null. So let's slicing it up. Sometimes you would kind of see this in the old C style languages, and sometimes Java doing tokenizers, which they would take in a string with and they say, hey, look for this space. And if it's a space, it's going to give you a string of the starting points of those strings, like first name space last name. When you do tokenizer, it's going to give you an array of those subsections of the string. The first index would be string, would be first name. The second one would be last name. So sometimes this would be kind of like a tokenizer. More about C++ strings. We just talked about C-style strings. Now we're talking about, going to kind of like review what we talked about with C strings before. So this is kind of going to be kind of like a review now. So include string. You're going to use string. Make sure you use a preprocessor director. Here's how you define it. Nothing has changed since we covered this in chapters 2 and 3. You've probably seen the same program before, so they're just doing a review. When you read in this item, first string, enter your first name, remember it ignores all the white space in front. First non-character is going to find and read up all the way till the space or new line. So they entered Peggy and see out Peggy. Nothing has changed from what we learned. When you use the getLine function, it's going to read the entire line, including the white spaces in front, all spaces in between the words, all the way up, but not including new line. Can you use relationship, because remember, to go back when you did the example, when it talked about this, when you use in between CN and getLine, you might have to use ignore. Because remember, we saw that example where it skips some of the CNs, so be cautious on that. Can you use relationship operators to compare strings? We've already seen this. You can compare strings using relationship operators. There's another one called comparison. It's performed similar to string compare, but string compare takes the difference. If the first one's larger, it gives back a numeric value that's greater than 0. If the second one I think is higher than the first one, it's going to give back negative. And if they're the same, the result is 0. Enter the last name, you read it in, enter in another name, displaying. They're just comparing it. Nothing's changed. Remember, string by itself, since you have a preprocessor, it's not part of the language, because that's what you have to preprocess directive. It is also not a primitive data type like int, float, double, char. Those are primitive data types because they're part of the language. String, just like in other languages, I like to think of them as objects. So there's more than one way to initialize them. And that's what they're saying here. We normally have seen it here, string here. You can create a string name and give it initial value Chris, like this. Or you can do string name assignment operator Chris. That will be the same. You can also use string your name and pass it in the variable. Same. Define a string and initialize its first 3 characters of my name. So my name, Chris, in this case, would be CHR. 3 characters of it. Now this is the same thing. Take my name. I think it's like read from here and read in the 2 characters, I believe. Define a string and initialize it with characters from my name starting at position 3 to here. So 0, 1, starting at 3, then reading off to 2, CR. So all these are just different ways of initializing strings. Do you need to use them? No. Just be familiar with it that there's more ways of initializing, just like we did vectors. You can have a vector with ints and just initialize with nothing. You can give it initial capacity. You can remember the second character can also initialize all the values. All they're doing is giving you options and ways of initializing strings. Define string and initialize it to 5A. So then in this case, you have a string that has A. 5. String operators, you could do this. You read them in from this, stream up the white space. You can display them back out. You can assign them. Remember, shorthand notation, you can append. This is just concatenates. Remember what we said? This concatenates. So now we have dual purposes for this addition part. We have it as addition for numerics, and we have it append for strings. You can use the square brackets like you can get individual elements outside of the string. And same thing with string comparisons, you can use them like that. Here's a string right here, dog, with a space right here. You read in this word right here, user enters hot tamale. Remember, I said it reads up, it ignores all white space at the beginning, finds the first non-white space, reads up, but guess what? It doesn't read tamale in this case, it reads up to the first white space. This is not get line, this is this. So word has just hot in it. So now they're using word 1, which is now hot, using the addition operator, word 2, which is space dog, and assigning it to phrase. So now phrase right here is hot dog. But now they're using shorthand notation to append, shorthand notation, concatenate on a bun to this. Then they're outing it, this phrase one character at a time. Since this is a string, they could have just put phrase and it would be hot dog on a bun. It would display it. But they want to show you that you can go character by character. Here's just another example. They're taking string 1, string 2. Now they'll concatenate it, but it doesn't touch, it doesn't change the original string. Because see out right here, see out on 17 is still str, ABC. String 2 is def. String 3 is a concatenation of ABC, def because they're appending. But now they are appending more GH3, GHI, and they're displaying out. This is, remember, shorthand notation to say take this, what it is now, add this to it, and put it back. We saw that with numeric. All we're doing now is with strings. These are some member functions that you can use. Remember, string, think of it as an object. It's not part of the language. You have to use a preprocessor. So if you use, I don't know, notice it, even when you do CIN dot, you see all these attributes that you can use. These are kind of objects for you to use. String, if you do string first name and you first dot, you will see all these attributes that you can have in your IDE. You can do the assignment, you can do the copy, you can do the data. You can either modify it by using the append operator, the clear, the erase, insert, replace, and swap. All these are given to you. If you have it, that's what I always say, practice, practice, practice. So now if you use first name as a string and you do first name dot, you will see these in your IDE. So you can use substrings, bind, front, back, all these. So instead of doing the shorthand notation, they're using the member functions. Instead of doing phrase plus minus append, they're using these. This might be a lot easier to read than saying, hey, plus an assignment operator. Because then it's readable to the person reading the code. You don't have to worry about like, oh, what is phrase? Is it numeric or is it a string? If it's a string, that shorthand addition assignment is treated as concatenation. However, if phrase or that variable is numeric, it's handled differently. But when you read it right here, saying phrase and dot append, you know it's going to be a string and then know exactly what it's doing. It's appending. So that's exactly what it's doing. Read in the word is hot, and you assign space hot dog. Append this, then append this at the end, starting at 13. Then you have this. Then you insert this at line 8 on the bug. You have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you have on a bun, you insert it, but you still have with mustard at the end. So now instead of doing the shorthand notation, now you have member functions. Remember, they add Jacksonville. Then you could do like this. All these would be the same, like dot append and so forth. All these things would be, when you hit dot, you have access to all these member functions that you can have. Remember, length gives you the number of characters. Oh, I keep touching my mouse. Number of characters, but not including the null bit. So Jacksonville has 12 characters, but there is still a null bit there. So technically the size is 13, but length only gives you the number of characters. Any questions regarding chapter 10? A lot of it is review. No? Okay. So I'm going to go over lab 5. Did I download it? Lab 5. Lab 5. Implement the following C++ programs for full credit. Only give me your CPP file. Imagine you are writing a software developer software package that requires users to enter their own passwords. Your software requires that the user's passwords meet the following criteria. The password should be at least 10 characters long. The password should at least contain one uppercase and at least one lowercase. The password should have at least one digit. Write a program that asks for a password and then verifies that it meets the criteria. If it doesn't, the program should display a message telling the user why it failed. It should not display all passwords criteria if it failed all. It should not display all password criteria unless it failed. I guess I should repost this. It failed all the criteria. If it failed only because the length was 10 characters, then it should inform the user of only that reason. For example, my passwords fail to meet at least one uppercase and does not contain a digit. If it fails to meet more than one criteria, it should display all the reasons why it failed. In other words, let me be strictly clear. Think of this, you have 4 parts to the lab. You have a loop that keeps on going until you enter a valid password. It should only display errors. It only should display the criteria after the user enters the password if it failed it. For example, like it says, my passwords, it doesn't have a digit and it doesn't have a digit or an uppercase. So it only displays those 2. So I have students that do this condition that says, if the character is 10 digits, if it's less than 10 digits, I'm not going to check the other 2. I want you to check all of it. So if you write code that says, if it doesn't have 10 characters, I'm not going to count the other half, you're pretty much sitting on a 80 or 70 because I can't grade half your stuff. Because you're not giving me all criteria. You might got the loop working, but you haven't got the 3 other parts working. I didn't say if these asterisks are not 1, 2, and 3. If this one does not pass, don't check the other one. I strictly said check all and only display the ones that fail. If it matches, then exit out saying password accepted, you're good. Any questions? I wrote this. Those bad characters criteria. Okay. Any questions on this?
I don't.
So I have a lot of students that says, hey, why did you give me a 70 on it? And if it didn't pass this one, they didn't check the other two. And I'm like, well, guess what? There's kind of like 4 parts to it. So you got 25, 25, 25. You got your loop, 25, 25, and 25. So remember, you're going to use a lot of these functions in this chapter 10. Any other questions or concerns?
Can you just remind me up to which PowerPoint Lab 4 we're allowed to use like information from?
Lab 4?
Yeah.
All the way up till, that will include 7.
Okay.
Why?
No, I'm just asking, just to double check.
Yes. The only ones that you can really go outside the classroom would be chapter 6. Remember, chapter 6 is you get extra credit. Remember, this is the way I grade you. 5 points for rough draft on copy, 5 points for the final write-up, 20 points for successful, 10 points for proper formatting, and 60 points for you. 60 points each requirements. So even before you're getting it, you are actually getting grades. Just easy thing, submitting a rough draft and submitting the final copy. That's 10 points right here. Doing normal formatting of code, that's 10 points. So you're already at 20 right here. And then with successful demonstration of code, that's 5, 10, 30, 40. You're already right there. And even if you have some hiccups, you're still good. And then right here, this has to be turned in. I'm going to correct this again. This must be modify this. This must be agreed upon during your rough draft. I'm not saying when you do something outside the scope of class, I'm not just saying change the color on the screen. But this is, even if you put it in, I'm going to change this to saying it must be included in your rough draft because we have to agree upon it, because I don't want to say it's working. Yeah, you did some extra, but we didn't agree upon it. So it has to be in your rough draft. And even if you put it in your rough draft and you do not implement it, it's extra credit. So it's not like you're going to be taking points away. It's extra. So this one right here, if you have everything good, you can get up to 110. So which thinks about it is that's 110 points. That boots up literally another bad grade to a different letter grade. Remember, if you do not demonstrate it, no demonstrate of the code, then no drop of lab 6. Any other questions or concerns? We only have 2 more labs, 2 more chapters after this. Chapter 11, which is covering structures, and then chapter 8, which would be like, here's the answers to the quiz. Any other questions or concerns? If not, have a great night.
This is. Do you still have some talking about Lab 4?
Okay, that was Joffrey. Okay. Any other questions or concerns from anyone else? Okay, we'll just wait for everyone to drop off.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, if you're gonna share something, let's make moderator or presenter. There you go.
I think you pretty much just answered my question. One of my questions to do with the lab, because we just now learned how to maybe check different data types, right? Like is letter and so forth, or is alpha.
That was not required for lab 4.
Yeah. What's that?
That's not required for lab 4.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's one thing I didn't need to do, because, you know, when I'm running through my program, it does run a loop if you put an A in there. You know what I'm saying? Instead of a number. I'll show you.
No, I understand.
So
It will break the loop. That I know, because that's one thing I'm going to grade on when you do your lab 6. But yes, because
Perfect.
I only grade up to the things when the lab was assigned. I think lab 4 I might assign it earlier on, but I says you will need lab 7, chapter 7 to do it. Because we covered chapter.
Yeah, we need chapter 6 and 7. So
We just covered now this that is alpha and so forth. It would be very cold for me to say yes, you must do it. Even though it would be a simple fix, it's not right to do it on you. We just talked about it. So it's
okay.
not
Cool.
required.
And then that's a main thing I wanted to ask you about. And then I just wanted to make sure that I'm on the right page, because if you remember, we discussed it, and you might not because you work then. We discussed my original working on the lab. I think I was overcomplicating the entire thing. Hey, look, infinite screen, just like you've got. Can you see my Visual Studio Code up right now?
Let me blow up the screen a little bit because I can't see it. Can you make it characters? Okay, that's better. Thank you. That's small. Okay, what's the question?
So I just want to make sure I'm not. I didn't oversimplify this. So when we last talked, I originally had like a menu that you went through and you added the grades, and then a menu you went through and you chose which category, and then I was going to implement another menu where you got to add grades or do some kind of calculation. And you had mentioned that's too much. I'm overthinking this lab. And I think the reason I was overthinking is because I work in an industry that does SIS, School Information Systems, and so I think about their system, right? How that system works, and I've worked with it for a very long time. So I've implemented something a lot simpler, and I just want to make sure that this is what you're looking for. I read through the thing over and over, and just making sure that I am picking up what you're putting down, right? And so, and I have one other question after I just do a simple. I'm just going to simply show you the main menu. The idea is that there's a title, choose which category you'd like to put an assignment in, 1, 2, 3, 4, to quit. And then they just go in and start adding the grades. When they're adding a grade, it's telling them which grade they're entering, right? That looks like everything you ask us on the lab paperwork, aside from the report, right? Which I learned my mistakes from the last report. So my report is looking pretty good overall. So I'm not going to get into that too much. What I wanted to ask you about is this warning down here. I couldn't find it. I found it outside the book. I'm getting a warning that says using uninitialized memory.
Where's quiz?
C6001.
I think it's on 166.
Yes, on 166. So I'm going to go down here. This is in my report.
Okay.
So the way I did it, so one of the things I failed at last quiz was that I had the output file in the loop, and so it would break, because it would pretty much output the first thing you entered, even if that was a wrong value, right? It was doing something really strange, and you found that issue. So the way to fix it, which I did fix it later, just to make sure I had a mental note, was to take it outside the loop in that case. So I did all my outputs afterwards in this case. So all my outputs are at the bottom. I'm using the set width, and of course precision, chapters 3, make it look nice and formatted. But here's quiz 0, which is this error here, using uninitialized memory. 166.
This is another bad thing right here, because right now, in this case, you're not making this output file usable. As in saying you have all these values hard-coded, which was not what
Yeah,
expected.
I plan to put it into a function. I like to kind of just work with making it work first, and then
not necessarily a function. It's the idea that all these things are hard-coded. Lab 1, 0.
Okay.
Lab 1, 2. You're breaking. You could have done right easily a for loop.
Yeah, I thought about that too. I could have used the loop to put out a lot of the stuff, and I've thought about that, but I didn't implement that at the moment because I was having a lot of trouble with formatting at first. So
Yeah, that wasn't the other part of the challenge, but yes. Okay, so we'll be using initialize on 166. Okay, quiz. So what is quiz? Can you spell up?
yeah, so if quiz is just it's an array. So hold on, my doggo is
The quiz
at the
right
same time. So
here. Okay.
yeah, so quiz is an array, and let me see. I'm not seeing it. Yeah, right here.
And it's not
It's an
initialized.
array
It
of
doesn't have any values to it.
yeah, and I didn't know if I should put like should I just are there null values? Like in SQL, if a field doesn't have anything in it, it's like a null value, and I think Java can have a null value as well. Is there? I didn't see anything like that when I was reading the book, like this. Or do you think it would be worth initializing it with zeros in it?
Let's
To
see
help
what it
get rid of this little.
does, because is it the same thing for everything? Exams, but you don't have one for lab.
They're all every single one of those errors there are. So this is uninitialized quiz, and this is byte 0. So it's for the
For lab, it doesn't have
all
one,
within line 166.
but it doesn't have one for lab, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought was weird too. So like, lab is just fine. This is lab and size, and here's lab size. So let's go look at.
Let's scroll up, scroll up.
You might be scrolling too fast, and for some reason you're really breaking up. So
The quiz and exam. So let's scroll up. Let me just see what as the code goes.
scroll up. Okay.
Okay.
So do you want to see? Here's all my.
The lab quiz. So it's like quiz. So scroll down. You're fine with your lab. So scroll down. Okay. Welcome to this lab 1. Lab 2. So if it's lab 1, you're going to go inside here and do yours. Okay. So, and there's probably a grad quiz lab thing. Okay.
And then exam works the same. And this is what I thought would be the easiest way to kind of do this, in my opinion. Was just use a simple switch statement that called in the functions that created.
The switch statement is just like, if else if. Yep. So go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Down. So where else is quiz used?
And then it's just in my output, which, like you mentioned, a for loop to do this.
Okay, look at
well.
one example. Okay, I think I might see it. So when you run this, it's only questioning the first one.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. So when I run it, let me run it for you. I'm just going to punch in some numbers real quick.
That's fine.
And just kind of show you how it works. And, and not do that there. So there we go.
I think it's something.
I haven't had any errors. Go ahead.
No, I think it's because the way it's going in, something might not be initialized correctly.
Okay.
Go ahead. Grade.
So I'm just telling hey, grades must be between 0 and 100, right? That's just what it could be anything, but I just chose that's fine for me, right? You didn't specify what the grades scale has to be.
No. But hopefully you did the bounds checking. That's all that matters.
Yeah. So if I put like a 0, it says.
But 0 is actually valid. So.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I meant -1. Sorry. It checks it. So let me just throw some grades in here real quick. This one. Same thing. This is what makes it fun testing it, right?
Yeah, but not for me doing it for 30 times. No.
Yeah, well, that's how I felt when I was working on getting this formatting just right, because it was driving me crazy. Make sure the formatting is correct. So, I mean, it ran through just fine. So I'm going to pop open the output file real quick on another screen. So let me Drag it over, maybe.
Also, the thing. Reboot.
So
Okay, I'm going to take those grades that you.
overall,
Okay. So when you go back into your quizzes, that one, you can minimize this. Go back into your code.
yeah. So back in the case part for the quizzes.
Yeah. So let's say, what you're passing an I. What is I?
I is just an iterator. So it should be int I here.
I.
Equal to 0.
Okay. Let's go down. Any quizzes? So when you go into one, if you go into, let's say, first one is labs, you reinitialize I back to something else.
Oh, for I is 0 every time.
No, not
I think it's reinitialized.
not inside this loop. Not inside this loop. Because when you go menu option right here, where is I being, after I do labs, where is I being set back to 0?
So I is back to 0. Let's say you run the lab one, right? So I'm not reinitializing it from 0 here. And I wonder, so I'm passing in 0 here into my functions at the top, right? So most of these functions are at the top. So let's say this one, the set grades. And I'm saying in this loop for I equals 0. So maybe that's like some idiosyncrasy there.
Because I right there is you're passed in. So why are you passing in I each time?
You know what? I think it's just a idiosyncrasy. Yeah, I actually, now that you're saying that, I honestly think I only need to pass in just the array and the size of the array.
And so
and define I.
let's change that up real quick. Change that up. Is it just like,
Let's do,
so delete that in the comma.
and just say like int.
Yeah.
And then let's go down here for set grade. It has to be fixed down here because it'll be calling too many. This, and it'll be doing the same thing for this one.
Now let's rebuild it.
Is there a refactor?
Yeah.
I use Visual Studio text editor.
There is, there might be. So what initialize 166? Uninitialized memory. I think what it is, oh, okay, I think I know what it is.
It's still within this.
I don't know. I think I know what it is because you have this going into different switch statements. So it may not be given value. And maybe that's not it. Maybe that's not it. Because it would do
Okay.
it would also do for
And that's
lab.
what I was kind of thinking is like there's no actual values in here initially. You know what I'm saying? And so I wondered if like it's saying, hey, this is an empty array. Is that, and if that's what it meant by it? It says byte 0 the next line over, you know, using uninitialized memory, quiz byte 0.
I'm trying to think, why would that be quiz is equal to 0? Using
And exam and quiz are both.
what is like on 180?
Yeah, 180 is this cat. It's category weighted average.
What is that?
Which is, so this is category weighted average is.
I think the 30.35.
Yeah, I think it is.
That's what you have right there. Output percentage 35, 35, 35.
Yeah, this is just hard. I hard coded this in because I was lazy. So it is actually it probably is the same thing. I've got some things I was working on here. So this is not a category weighted average. Here it is. They're just empty fields actually. They're uninitialized doubles.
Go back to your code. Go back to your code. I mean, that's the bottom of the report. Go back bottom. And then go open up your report.
Oh yeah. Let's see.
Let's move that
That's
up.
this. It's this.
Okay, 35, 35, 35. And then cat average weight. Average quiz. So look at cat average quiz. Where are you calculating that?
Yeah. Good question. As in the function up here at the top. Let's see. That is right here, if I remember right. It's going to return this, and I believe it's just weighted grade, and it's the size times the weight. So I set these weights here. So it's
Yeah, you're calculating it based upon the average of that times by the weight. That makes sense.
which is another function up here.
So go back to the thing and go to that cat weight average where you actually calling this signing in your main.
Where I'm calling it down in my main. Okay. Yeah, I am calling it. I believe
Right.
I'm calling it right here.
Go back up to your main and type it. Go back up. No, scroll where you need those variables. Scroll up.
Mm-hmm.
Give those values 0, 0, 0.
Oh, just give them zeros? Gotcha.
And these are warnings, so it's not going to be a showstopper. I think what
I figure
now build it.
it still makes me very curious, you know.
I think what it
And now
is.
you've kind of figured out some things that I want to clean up too. So
Hey,
some redundancy. Hey, you cleaned up 3 of them.
so I think what it is. Let me see. What is 166? But I think what it is I think it's with that byte 0 that the notion is just a conjecture that since you have different ways of the code can execute, it might not give. It probably just sees one path doing labs. So let me go back to see how your labs are initialized. Let's see your labs. Because if you probably give quizzes some value, it would probably go away. So scroll up.
Yeah.
Labs.
So like,
Lab is right there, size. And the only thing that you're doing with your labs is calling it in that function, correct?
like, yeah, these are being called into the functions at the top. Exactly.
So scroll down. I want to see how your labs are compared to the other ones.
They're all technically the exact same except for exam, you know, because exam doesn't have the lowest grade drop.
I think what it is, scroll down. You have all this in main, correct? Scroll down.
Yeah, this is all in main.
I want to say, this is just conjecture, that it only sees the one case path. So here, do a quick question. Do this. Just comment out line 144, 142, 143, and 144. All your code in the first case.
Yeah.
I want it to still be there. I want it to still be there. But what I'm just taking a hunch. We put the set grades for quiz 1 in case 1. Will it error out on the other one? So, or I wonder if
You're saying just comment these out, the
what about if you
lab
just
one, and see if now the quiz is
just comment out the entire case 1. Just comment out the entire case 1.
okay. Yeah. Backslash this, and then you close it.
I have a feeling it's going to do the
Build
same.
it.
Now build it. Yeah, build it.
There you go.
I
Took away the quiz.
got it. Yeah, my conjecture was right. But it is showing, what it is seeing, it won't go. What kind of threw me through the loop is literally is I'm surprised they didn't give you error on quiz 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All the quizzes. But the thing is, when you have your code the way it is, I guess when it compiles everything compiles. But the thing is, the logic thing that says, hey, in this path, it might not initialize quizzes, and exams properly. If that makes you sense. So it only looks at kind of like my rationalize is saying it only sees one path, case one. And in case one, you have your lab.
Almost like the short circuit principle, right? It's the first thing and assumes the rest, right?
Yes.
Except for in this case, it's not assuming it. It's just saying this one is initialized and the rest aren't, kind of thing.
And sometimes you see that in other languages, when you have multiple avenues to go and you don't initialize something correctly, it will give those error messages. So take that off. So take that comment out. And go and comment. Now go at the very top of quiz. And quiz array, put equal sign.
Stop. There we go.
Equal sign, curly brace, 0 inside. And that's fine. Now do the same thing for the exam. Because remember, partial initialization arrays of local variables, you initialize one, the rest of them are 0 when they're not there. So now,
And then build it.
build it.
The way
Woohoo!
she's found. Okay.
Does that make sense now?
All right. It does. So it makes sense. So pretty much it's in the path that it's when it's compiling, it's kind of initializing lab in the case because it's just we think of like if and else if, the first if statement, right?
Yeah, that to my understanding because I've seen it before where it's like that's why a good programming standard is you have one function, you have one way in and one way out, right? But the thing is inside this function, such as main, which is main function, you can have multiple avenues, aka if else and this if statement. In this case, you have these variables. It only sees my logic is like, oh, it sees only this scenario, the first scenario, but these other scenarios have variables that have not been initialized. So, and later on, the key reason why it comes up is after all those scenarios, you are using that. So, like he says, what happens? The problem is the way you have the code written right now is what happens if the person just types in labs and wants to report.
Yeah, I mean right now it's not. It would do. I guess it would probably break because it didn't have any initialized values in the other arrays. Right? So it would probably break.
When you enter in your labs and then you quit, when does it write your When does it write your result? At the end of when they choose the option to quit?
As of right now, I think so. Yeah.
So run your program again. It's not already running, is it? Because if it is, it would have problems.
I don't think so. Well, yeah, I guess it was.
Sometimes with the linker problem, like, oh, this one doesn't compile, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm already running one. So just do labs.
All right. So if I just run lab and I just punch in a bunch of grades, right? And then now what? Just quit? 4?
Right, 4 quit. Yes.
Okay.
Now look at your.
Go punch up my report here.
You get zeros.
Okay.
Because you get zeros because we put zeros in. Now close this. Let's do it again real quick. and take out the changes that we did for your quiz and exams.
Yeah.
You can always put that back in.
I know. I get it. I'm not worried about that. I've got a few changes now that you kind of talking through. That redundancy I had in my code there. So, and then
Now quit.
I quit. So let's see. Hey, there we go.
So that
Hey, that would have got me marked.
No, but see that's why I emphasize when you do the menu thing, there's no problem taking effort, but now you're adding extra levels of complexity and bugs to it. Because when you initially wrote it, it says run a program, it's going to ask for labs, quiz, and exams. So the way you wrote it before would have never had that problems with quizzes and exams because the code would have gone through and hit that. Now on your switch statement, it may or may not go through that code.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it kind of echoed right there. Says, hey, this may not have been initialized because I have other avenues to go. So this just solidifies it, saying, hey, that's why it errored out on quiz and exams. You think it would have done the same thing for labs too? I don't know why. It didn't.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. I mean,
and that's the reason why I commented out case 1. Because when you have case 1, labs was not there, but exams was.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it forced that says it only sees the first scenario, which was case 1. We took case 1 out, exams were fine, but it errored out still on exams. But it only sees the first pass through. So,
Gotcha. Yep.
Thank
you very much for your time on that one.
So, you see that? You have 3 more hours or 11:59, whatever.
I mean, that fixes that.
What?
I said that definitely takes care of that. So thank you for your help on that. And then thanks for the pointing out the redundancy. I already know I need to come in here and do some comments, so I'm going to do that as well. But is your recommendation? So I mean, I try to make this as functional as possible, as many functions as possible. Right? That's what you wanted, modular code that can be reused, and that's what I've done. Making switch statements. Do you recommend trying to put this gigantic output funness that just irritated the piss out of me into a function of some sort?
The thing is, you can create a function and pass all the variables in, but since you're time constrained, I would probably see what you would want to do. You can create a function. The only thing that I don't like, and it would take more time, is I do not like the hard-coded numeric values in there. 0, 1.
Gotcha. So like it's here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You would, as a loop, it would be passing this in, and then
if you put it in, and then you would have to have your conditions go because your exams on the second part would only need to be going up for the first 2. But then after that, after like the lab 6, you would have to format your code over a little bit because now your quizzes are going further. That's why I put it in that particular order. Labs, quizzes, and so forth. So you would have to put that restriction on, oh, I want this report generating using looping. But then I notice, oh, I can't just loop it certain ways because, some arrays don't have all the elements and so forth.
Yeah.
So a lot of students were spending their time.
Yeah, I mean, I considered it. That was another thing I thought of, and then I was like, would a multi-dimension array make it easier in some cases? But I don't know. I would just have to. I'll take a look at that and see what I can do. I think I'll definitely clean up the things that we already talked about first.
Yes.
And I don't know.
You can. I mean, you have the bulk of the concepts down because I see if you go up in your main, in your switch statement, you have the main concept app because I can see you saying category draft average. You're using code over and over again. Weighted average. You're using codes. You're not saying, let's say, get grades. You're not saying get quiz grades, get lab grades. You're reusing those. Those were the main concepts of this lab. Was code reuse, because I've seen a lot.
I mean, I'm just kind of a stickler with grades. I mean, most people take that 80 as like a real, like on my last lab, you gave me like an 80, and most people are like, oh yeah, I got an 80, but for me, it's not good enough. So, I don't. If that's really going to hurt me, I might spend a few minutes trying to loop through this real quick.
If you want to try doing it, what I would recommend is take this lab, clean up what you want, and say this is your must-have. If I can't get it to work, submit this one. But if I can't get it to work,
that's what I do.
But make sure you don't mess it up and submit something that wow.
Yeah, I always go test it on a virtual machine before I submit it, just to be safe.
If you're gonna try,
there's been a lot of Visual Studio updates lately. Go ahead.
No, but that's like just want to say, if this is working right now, I would save this off before you make any more touches to it, because if things get really crazy, you still have this good one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to make changes to it, then replace the other one. But always have, because a lot of students start making changes to it, and they run down the rabbit holes like, oh, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's getting worse, and then they try to revert everything back. But they don't have a pristine copy, especially when it comes to deadline. All right.
Well, thank you very much for your extra time. I appreciate that.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.